Hi, we're back at Cooper's Ferry, and I'm over here in Area B, and you can see behind me there's a lot of really irregular shapes and sort of unusual digging styles, it appears, but we have a reason for doing this. I'm standing inside of what would have been, we think, B. Robert Butlers Trench in the 60s, and this last week we've been working hard to remove the fill from inside his trench. So in the process of doing that, we just want to take the disturbed, mixed up sediment off of the undisturbed stuff that's underneath it. And we can tell that it's disturbed because we can find a lot of unusual things inside the trench fill. We've been finding cans and bottles and pieces of plastic wrappers and pudding cups and all kinds of things that basically look like the foods and drinks that the crew were having while they were working out here. And they probably threw it in to mark where the trench was, sort of the traditional backfill party as it's known in archaeology. We'll be able to get ourselves fully through Butlers Trench within this week, I think, and we'll be able to put that behind us and move on toward figuring out what was underneath his trench and the things that he was encountering so we can make the most out of all the research that's been done here already.
So before we even get started with scraping or excavating at all, what we'll do is take a photo of it as is so that we can see that later. And then we'll map many points all over the feature, and that'll go into our Archie system so that later we can actually rebuild like a 3D representation of what it looked like, because once we excavate it, it's gone. So we'll go really slow, and we're going to put all of the sediment in bags, and we'll take those to the lab.
So we can test all the different things that we find within the feature. We'd like this darker sediment could be charcoal or ash of some sort. It could be radiocarbon dated, so we can have an exact date of when this fire pit was made. We could also find whatever they were cooking or heating up in there. If they were heating up rocks, we might find fire-cracked rock. If they were using it as a food source, we could find bones, bulbs, charred plant remains.
We place these blue boxes in the feature because they allow us to take a sample that we can send to a lab, and then the laboratory will turn them into a glass slide that they grind it so thin it transmits light through the rock particles. We can see the arrangement of all the little things that make up this feature at a really fine scale. And honestly, nothing hides at that scale. We can figure out what the nature of the coloration is. Are there little tiny burn things, or is it because it's some special material that's been put into the ground? I don't know yet, but we're going to figure that out once we get these micromorphology slides back.
So basically what you're looking at is what we think is a feature that we found in our unit today. It stood out because it was a different color, texture, and density from the rest of the sediment in our unit. So the professor took a look at it and determined that it might possibly be wood ash. So we're actually going to excavate this entire feature separately from everything else, and they're going to take it back for micromorphology studies at their lab.
So what we have here is a basalt uniface, or more a scraper, that would be used going this way. You can tell it was modified by the unified flaking along the edge here. We found it in Unit 15, Level 4. Usually we don't find basalt flakes this big. This is pretty large.
Alright, so I'm here with a pretty interesting find that I got yesterday. It's actually an Obsidian biface that we got in Area B, and what's really neat is we found it in situ, which is pretty rare for things like this. In situ is just when we're troweling, or in my case skim shoveling, and we find it in the ground as it is. So what that means is that we have to get a reading number and take a picture of it in place. And usually we also take sediment samples, but in the circumstances it was in a kind of a what's called an alluvial fan, or like a river plain. So taking sediment samples wouldn't have necessarily given us that much information. And yeah, this is actually only the second obsidian biface that we've found in the entire camp this year. So that's pretty neat. And in the unit next to mine, they found a bunch of debitage, obsidian debitage, that was lower down. So it could even, I'm speculating, but it could just be flakes from making this, or something similar.
Hi, I'm Mike Waters, and I spent the last 2 days at the Cooper's Ferry site, and it was a pleasure to be here, and was able to examine the stratigraphy and the artifacts from both block excavations A and B, and I have to say that it's a fantastic excavation at a wonderful archaeological site, and that already significant results have come from these excavations, including the establishment of a chronology for western stem type projectile points, as well as the potential for pits that might extend the age range of the western stem tradition farther back in time. So it's just a fantastic archaeological site, and Loren Davis and his crews are to be commended on an outstanding excavation, and you know, excavated to the highest possible standards.